Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth. I've topped the windswept heights with easy grace and touched the face of God.
Flying to me is probably a feeling of being free, being able to do things that you normally couldn't do.
That says it all right there. It's, unless you fly, you can never experience it. And I don't mean get in an airplane and ride. You know, nowadays, most people get in an airplane, they get a bag of peanuts handed to them, a soft drink, and to them that's flying. That's not flying. That's transportation. There's a difference between transportation and flying.
It's hard for me to put it into words, and sometimes it's like words don't really describe what it's like to be a pilot. You just have to do it.
The F-22 and the F-35 represent the pinnacle of modern aviation, true examples of next-generation technology available today and ready to lead aviation well into the future. This evolution of flight has taken more than a century. Many of the discoveries made that have shaped the industry have come from one small corner of the world. From streamlining the early warbirds of World War II to improving the capabilities of today's supersonic stealth fighters, the story of modern aviation cannot be told without the pilots, researchers, and enthusiasts right here in Virginia. Today, Oceana Naval Air Station in Virginia Beach is home to one of the largest air shows in the country. For more than 50 years, this show has provided an opportunity for people to experience the very latest in aviation technology.
Well, things are happening pretty quickly, 400 knots, about 420 miles per hour. You're out there, you're pulling maximum G, 7.5 Gs without the G suit, and really it's a mental and physical workout, really. And you park that jet at the end of the flight, you're sweating and you're tired.
Our mission is to demonstrate to the American public the precision teamwork that's inherent in all their Navy and Marine Corps teams that are out there forward deployed. We put a little bit of showmanship on it with the blue jets and the blue suits, and we show some pride to the American public, and the ability, it's a chance for us to demonstrate to them what their military can do.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Aviation Delta breakout.
Boy, I tell you, it's a pretty intense 45 minutes that we fly when you do a full show. We're making things happen that looks like we're about to maneuver and hit each other, which is also fun because it shows the crowd that that's what we're trained to, the precision that we're trained to.
The Diamond 360, it's the second maneuver we do, it's the one we fly the closest, it's probably the hardest maneuver we fly. Yeah, it looks very simple and basic, as the four planes just coming from the right, dip down and touch center point and go out to the left.
In order to do, fly air shows for a living and be a professional air show pilot, you have to be very focused, very, very disciplined. Really what I do is sort of a combination of air show flying and competition flying. Try and keep my show very, very precise and keeping it exciting with a lot of tumbles and, tail slides, flying upside down. I do a ribbon cut where I fly about 20 feet up the ground and cut a ribbon with my propeller, upside down. Why do I do it? It's what I'm good at. I love it. It's exciting. It's fun to get paid to go rage around and do this, and that's how I earn my living.
The Oceana Air Show was the very first air show I ever went to with my father, and this was back in probably 1990, 1991 time frame. And so always been interested in aviation, and as a result, sort of followed that career, followed that goal. I jumped on this opportunity because knowing where I came from and knowing how important it was to talk to pilots and to understand what they did and how they got there is crucial. So hopefully I can provide that service to children, to even adults, just for guidance on how to basically become a pilot or enter that career field.
What do you think? You want to fly this someday? Huh? You don't know?
With a combination of airplanes, new and old, the Oceana Air Show attracts people of all ages. The classic planes that line the airfield give every generation a chance to step back in time.
This is a step back in time, and it's everything about it. I mean, the way it smells and the way it feels and the way it flies and the way it sounds is all from the 30s and 40s. And so it's very easy to sort of be transported back in time in that sense. And hardly ever do we encounter somebody going for a ride who has any experience of an airplane like this. They may have flown in an airliner or in a small Cessna or something, but they've never flown anything like this. So it's always a new experience for them. And there's a chance to get a feel in a very real sense, in a tangible sense of what aviation used to be like.
Preserving Virginia's rich aviation history has become the mission of pilots all over the Commonwealth. Today, a secluded hangar at Dinwiddie County Airport is home to one of the few remaining World War II pilot trainer planes, the SNJ. Also known as the T-6, the SNJ has trained more pilots than any other trainer aircraft in the world.
I think it's important that we keep these planes. One, it shows the history, shows us where we've been in aviation. If you don't know the past, how are you ever going to exceed in the future? You build upon that. This was a building block right here, and you keep those building blocks, and you keep going, and you improve from this. You teach young people, what it was like back then. History is important. You need to have that. You keep it around also for the people that actually flew them.
My favorite prop airplane, of course, of all time is the SNJ. It's built like a tank. It's very hard to break it. It has a Pratt & Whitney engine, which is very reliable, and it's always been my odds-on favorite.
Just not everyone, but almost everyone flew that plane, especially if you were going the fighter route, you flew the T-6. And if you look at the cockpit of the T-6, if you look at the landing gear on the T-6, and then you look at other airplanes like the Mustangs and so forth, you're going to say, well, that's in a T-6, this is in a T-6, where these parts were all interchangeable on the planes. Now, the performance between the T-6 and the Mustang, that isn't close. But the flight characteristics and so forth, it's a very, very squirrely airplane on landing. And it was designed that way because they wanted a guy, they figured if he could fly this, they could fly any of the fighters of World War II. Mixture's up. Hit the starter button or the magnetos. It barks, it chokes, it spits smoke out, and just when you think she's firing, it dies. Now you go back, wobble pump again, and it's a whole procedure. But when it starts, there's no sound like big and round. People say, well, do you travel back in time when you ride in a plane? Yes, you do. You really do. I'm sure there's some psychiatrist out there right now saying that boy needs years and years of therapy. But I think if you asked anybody that flies these things, remember, people that fly World War II fighters and so forth nowadays, we always got to remember, you're not a fighter pilot, you're flying a fighter. Fighter pilots are down at Langley and Oceana and Virginia Air Guard. Those are our modern day fighter pilots. We have the privilege of flying the fighters that the younger generation flew back in the 40s and 50s.
This little P-40 here was a wreck in Russia. It was shot down by a Messerschmitt, crash landed. It was discovered up near Murmansk or someplace, I don't really know where. But there are companies around the world who are actually doing nothing but restoring World War II aircraft.
The Virginia Military Aviation Museum down in Pungo, Virginia. It is unbelievable what Jerry Yeagan has done down there. The collection, they're flying too. They're not just sitting in a hangar for you to look at. You can go down there and watch these airplanes fly, which is amazing.
I feel very fortunate to be associated with them. They have good maintenance, they have good airplanes. They're 60, 70-year-old airplanes being flown by an 80-year-old man. I first flew these airplanes in 1950, that's almost 60 years ago, and I get as much enjoyment out of flying it now as I did then. I just love the Corsair. If I've flown it over 1,000 hours, I've had probably 500 carrier landings in it. It took me to combat in Korea and brought me back. So there's a lot of reasons why I love this airplane. I probably get some arguments from some of the Mustang pilots, but I think the Corsair is just the finest airplane that was ever built. It's powerful, it does what you want, when you want, and how you want to do it. It may not be quite as fast as the Mustang, but it's, I think on a one-on-one dogfight with a Mustang, it would, depending on the pilot, hold its own for sure.
The Mustang gets most of the credit all the time. I think it's because it's the sleekest, it's the prettiest, it's the most glamorous of the fighters, but you can't leave out like the P-47. It was a rock that flew through the air. There are stories of ME-109s coming up behind the P-47 and completely firing every bullet they had, 50 caliber shells and 20 millimeter cannons at this P-47, and the P-47 made it home. Then you look at other planes like the Hellcat that the Navy used. That was their premier fighter, was the Hellcat. Started off with the Wildcat, which was a good fighter, had a tough time keeping up with the Zero, but when they moved on to the Hellcat, that was an airplane that really turned the tide there in the Pacific Theater.
Now all Navy airplanes, especially Grumman, were named after animals. Wildcat, Hellcat, Bearcat, Tiger Cat, Tomcat was their last one.
I can't pick one. It's hard to pick just one, which is the best. They're all great. You know, just to touch them and look at them, they're just all fantastic.
The warbirds being kept alive and in the air by the Military Aviation Museum at the Virginia Beach Airport played a tremendous role in the Allied victory of World War II. One of the major reasons for the Allied air superiority was the research being done in the little town of Hampton, Virginia.
It was perceived by the local people here as a bunch of kooks out at Langley. It was not a hostile relationship, but we were looked at as kind of funny, you know, because this was a kind of a sleepy little seaport town in the early days. But this sleepy little seaport town had something big time going here that has had a huge impact. It's been seen all over the world, and still is. NASA's was then NACA contribution to aviation in World War II was enabling. Every new fighter that was produced, and they were producing a lot of them during the World War II era, came to Langley for what they called drag cleanup testing.
Fighters during the early days of World War II were simply not fuel efficient enough to protect the bombers on longer missions. Reducing the drag for these fighters became the top priority for researchers at Langley. In addition to streamlining the aerodynamics, New laminar flow wings were developed, and they proved to be the difference maker for extending a fighter's range.
And by developing these laminar flow airfoils, the wing for the same amount of lift would have a much lower drag. And that was first implemented on the P-51. It was the first laminar flow airfoil wing. And the P-51 was the first fighter introduced in the World War II that could escort the bombers all the way from England to the target, defend them against attack by German fighters, and return to England.
P-51 pilot and Petersburg, Virginia native Lieutenant Colonel Howard Baugh flew bomber escort missions as part of a fierce fighter group which left a legacy far greater than their proudly painted red tail wings. The Tuskegee Airmen would be remembered for attaining the most successful mission record in the war and for bridging a racial divide that until World War II kept African Americans from serving their country as fighter pilots.
We didn't realize that what we were doing was any more significant than anything else that was being accomplished, even though that their record showed eventually that they had nearly a perfect record of escorting the bombers. They got so proud of themselves that, especially the 332nd, that they got the reddest paint they could find and painted the tail of some of red so that it could be recognized. The Germans called them Schwarzvogelmenschen, blackbird men. The Americans called them red-tailed angels. Whenever the bomber pilot looked out of his window and he saw the red tails, they felt safe.
In many cases, pilots of the B-24 Liberator were looking out the window at those red tails. More than 18,500 B-24s were assembled during World War II, making the Liberator the most produced plane in history. During peak production at Henry Ford's Willow Run plant in Michigan, a new B-24 Liberator rolled off the assembly line every hour. Once tested, these enormous and difficult-to-fly bombers would be placed in the hands of some of the youngest and most courageous pilots of the era.
I was 19. I was the youngest B-24 pilot in the war. And we took off from West Palm Beach, Morrison Field, on my birthday, April the 10th, 1944, and 20 years old. Boy, was I happy.
I felt like I had the world by the tail going downhill and enjoying life to the fullest. When I first got into the B-24, you really didn't stop to think about what might happen or what the responsibilities were. Something you wanted to do, something that you just had set your heart on, and you went in and you tried to do the very, very best you could. Size didn't really matter that much. The bigger they were, the better I liked them. The only thing in a 24 to me was a lot of pilots didn't like them because they were heavy on the controls. You had to use some effort, some muscle to control it. But it would respond. It responded beautifully. It was a good formation ship. It was a wonderful instrument ship. In all the planes that I flew, and I flew quite a few of them, I never had one that I liked as well for instruments as I did the 24. The 24 was an outstanding aircraft to me.
Ford that built most of them, middle of my steering wheel, big round thing like a horn button, had the Ford logo on there that you still use today. They rattled like a tin can, but they were easy to maintain. The biggest problem it had is everything operated hydraulically. And of course, hydraulic fluid burns. And you haven't lived till you've been set on fire, which I have a couple of times. When you're on fire in the air, you know, there's not a whole lot you can do. But oftentimes the German fighters, they could tell you were out there alone, the radar would tell them. And you had a real problem coming back from anywhere alone. They'd come in out of the sun always because you were going to the target in the morning and you're heading east. And they'd come in out of the sun and you wouldn't see them. You'd see their 20 millimeters. They'd always start firing too soon. And once you saw that little bright lights winking, then you'd start looking for them and there they'd be up there, wingtip to wingtip. One mission, we had about 250 of them on us.
The hump was set up, the Himalaya Mountains was set up to going into China from India. You had to be at least 20,000 feet to clear the mountains. And then within 23, 25 miles to our left was three mountain peaks we called the Three Sisters. They went up to 23,005. Winds aloft could be well over 100 miles an hour from any direction, head on, tail behind, from right or left, and it don't take 100 mile an hour, 150 mile an hour wind much to drift you 23 miles, so you could fly into the Three Sisters without even knowing you were hitting them until you hit them. And just to the left of that was Mount Everest, which went up to 29,500 feet. The Allied forces lost over 3,000 aircraft going over the hump. Out of that, over 2,000 of them was never found. We were given targets at briefings. We were given certain targets that we were supposed to hit. And we had a lot to do with the lines of communication, which consisted of bridges and rail yards and Japanese headquarters and different things like that, like the bridge over the River Kwai at Kanchanaburi. They had a prisoner of war camp just on the north side of the river, and you didn't dare drop over the bridge, because if you did, you're going to land your bombs right in the middle of an Allied prisoner of war camp. I had, not because it was mine, but I still say I had the best flight crew in the United States Army Air Corps. And I had the privilege, you say, or the honor, of being permitted to fly one of the airplanes home as an aircraft commander. I was permitted, and I was permitted to fly it all the way home. And when we came in and we saw the coastline of Florida, you can't describe it. You can't describe the feeling. You can't feel the emotion that rides over you at that period of time. But hell, I'm only 21 years old then, and I still felt this.
Soon after World War II, a new thunder began to fill the sky. In the early 1950s, experts agreed that moving aviation forward meant moving the airplane engine to the back. Jet engines were beginning to take the place of their piston-driven predecessors.
My inspiration to begin flying was actually the movie Top Gun back in 1988. I'd always dreamed of learning to fly, and Top Gun really inspired me to pick up the phone and actually go for a flight lesson. I started flying the T-28 back in 2004. After the T-6, the T-28 became the primary trainer. It was designed to train pilots to transition to jets. The systems on this airplane are quite complex, but they were similar to the jets of the day.
The only thing that I can see wrong with the early jet age is that technology really hadn't caught up with the engines. They were underpowered. Every one of them was underpowered. The airplanes were great. The Panther and the Banshees, they were the first ones that really populated the fleet. But they were troublemakers. I was launched for about an hour and a half flight. And about 30 minutes through it, we were 100 miles from the ship, and my plane exploded. The bird went straight up, the controls were limp, and I said, well, I'm just a passenger in this airplane, I'm not a pilot anymore. And the old bird started to spin. And then I understand from other pilots watching it, the right wing either folded or came off. And just then the old bird tucked under, and I was in negative G spin, and I looked through the windshield, and there's the water down there, and the clouds are starting to come up, and you have a tough time trying to keep yourself together and not panic. When the airplane is going through violent gyrations, the G forces are so strong that you can't move your arms. So After more conniptions and whifferdills, whatever it was doing, I managed to hook one hand on one side of the ejection seat. And I pulled the curtain with both hands and the seat fired.
As time moved on and technology advanced, once again, Langley Research Center proved to be the point of origin for major discovery. Spearheading the effort to achieve supersonic flight, Dr. Richard Whitcomb changed the shape of aviation by altering the shape of a plane's fuselage. The Coke bottle fuselage reduces drag, as Dr. Whitcomb would prove using the F-102.
The F-102 was built to be a supersonic fighter, and the prototype, they rolled it out, and it wouldn't go supersonic. And they actually shut down the assembly line, modified the design, and flew the airplane and it went supersonic, and became a successful military fighter as a result. I mean, the jet revolution, particularly with regard to fighters, I mean, the big thing with fighters that gives you the spectacular performance that you see when you go to a modern air show that the military puts on is the enormous power in the jet engine.
The favorite jet was the A4 Skyhawk. The A4 is the favorite of a lot of guys, you know, if you talk to them.
Well, the A4 is one of the neatest airplanes ever built. They call it Heineman's hot rod. They call it the throwaway bomber, the scooter. It was a tiny airplane that weighed 9,000 pounds empty. That's tiny for a jet. Had at the time the fastest roll rate. I don't know if the new ones are faster or not, but it's 720 degrees a second. But that's 2 circles a second, which is, you get dizzy doing that.
The first time I took it aboard ship, I said, this is a good carrier plane, because the airplane was very responsive on the throttle. Boy, there was no lag. You pushed the throttle up and that little puppy took off. They were just easy to operate on the ship. They didn't have folding wings. They didn't need it. You know, I think it had a 28-foot wing spread or something like that.
In Top Gun, there was the aggressor airplane. It was fighting with these F-14s. The hot version of it with the big engine can out-turn all these things, and it twists and turns. It's so small, you don't need stealth technology because it's got about the same radar image as a Sparrow.
The A4 was a bogey aircraft, a bandit simulator when I was at Miramar. And we would, as students, routinely get spanked by the A4. The younger guys would always go up against the older guys. The young guys are in the Tomcats, the older guys are in the A4s, and it wasn't even a fair fight. Occasionally you can get your nose on them. They might make a mistake that you notice and you can capitalize on. But they were a hard fight. Flying the F-14 is a remarkable experience. The airplane itself was designed in the 50s and 60s and built in the 70s. It came out in the early 70s. So there's no fly-by-wire, and it's a very difficult airplane to fly. But the beauty of the airplane is, like most products built by Grumman, the Tomcat is remarkably tough and fast. Let's talk about dogfighting. That's just flat out fun. But dogfighting is not all about speed. Speed doesn't mean a whole lot. Speed means something when you're trying to run away. But other than that, it's all about turning rate and radius. How tightly you can turn. How soon you can put your nose on somebody to shoot them. That's basically what you're trying to do. Well, while you're doing this, you've got, say, 320 knots on the jet, and you reef back on the stick to the max allowable G, which for the F-14 was 6.5. I think the Hornet's 7.5 or 8. That's 8 times the force of gravity pulling you down to your seat. So, you know, a 200-pound person, you know, weighs 1,600 pounds. He's trying to fight, and so you're trying to lift your arm and move. More importantly, you're trying to move your head against those forces of gravity.
The A4 wouldn't do that. You didn't have to worry about pulling 8 Gs because it couldn't. You know, the wings would come off first. It's really hard to describe. The vision goes down to right to where you can just see tunnel vision as the blood drains out of your head. Your vision just goes into, you're looking at a little pinpoint down at the gyro and the horizon, and then as you ease the Gs, it all comes back. But you just feel all squeezed in, and you learn to anticipate it. I enjoyed pulling a lot of Gs and you work up a big sweat. It's just in a 45-minute dogfight, you'd come back wrung out, and it felt like it ran a marathon.
Joining jets in the air during the Vietnam years was another aircraft out to prove its mettle. The Bell Huey spent its early days doing what a utility helicopter was meant to do.
There is something to this day, I can't tell you what it is, and you will find it among other pilots who flew the Huey, that there is something that the Huey grew on you. And I came back from Vietnam thinking that this has probably been one of the greatest experiences, flying this helicopter, because it was so special. You know, you look back on the days when there was the horse cavalry, and then World War II came along. It was mostly transport by jeeps and trucks and this kind of stuff. And then here comes a helicopter that can get people quickly to a frontline situation, but also come back in quickly and get them out of it. It was our platoon's turn to lead the flight on an assault. And there had been some North Vietnamese spotted in a field, and it was about 20 miles west of Saigon. I was based just north of Saigon. And we led the flight in there thinking that, you know, we were just going to sit the aircraft on the ground, the infantry troops are going to get off, and that's going to be it, and then we're going to peel off and go get some more troops. Well, as we approached the areas where we were going to land in, there was a dike going across the field, and behind that dike were 10 North Vietnamese soldiers in uniforms. And as we came in and flared the aircraft, I was just expecting just to set the aircraft down. Well, the next thing you know, the bullets are flying. Our aircraft, the thing that saved us was that you have to raise the nose of the aircraft to zero your airspeed to set down. And most of the bullets went in the bottom of the aircraft. But by the time I looked up, we had no instruments working. Our hydraulics were going, so the flight controls that are like power steering, that we were losing that. We had oil and gas coming out of the back, and so we were able to just kind of peel off. And the thing that I will always remember were the 25th Infantry division troops on our aircraft. They never hesitated. When those skids touched the ground, they were off that aircraft, they hit the ground flying and started returning fire. And that saved us, I think, the one saving thing that I will always be grateful for those infantry people. You know, when the Huey would come in overseas, the first thing we'd do is strip all the insulation out. That would be stored. Anything else that added any kind of weight to that aircraft, because we knew if we got that weight out of there, it meant that 2 or 3 more people we could bring out of a fire zone. And that was what was most important. So it wasn't how pretty she was, but those helicopters were just so smooth and such workhorses. Many of us pilots, we looked at the Huey like you would look at a woman. This was something really special, you know, and we loved our aircraft, no doubt about it. It was not unusual to see a pilot get out and walk by the front of the aircraft and stop and turn around and kiss the Huey on the nose, just because they were that special to us.
After returning from Vietnam, Huey pilot Jim Mann spent 11 years flying with the Virginia Army National Guard unit located at Richmond International Airport. Jeff Mann followed his father's footsteps through the ranks of the very same Guard unit and into the cockpit of today's top utility helicopter, Sikorsky's UH-60 Black Hawk.
I'm definitely proud to be following his footsteps. I don't think you could call it anything else, really. And was that my initial intention when I joined? Maybe not. I think it was really more a desire to be a pilot. The Black Hawk helicopter, the Army calls it the UH-60, which stands for Utility Helicopter, Model 60. It's built by Sikorsky. It was designed in the late 70s and first fielded in the Army in the early 80s. The utility helicopters are just that. They're much like a sport utility vehicle, if you will. They're designed to be able to do multiple jobs. To operate a helicopter is a little more complicated than just a regular fixed-wing airplane, at least a simple fixed-wing airplane. In an airplane, you know you're always going to be going one direction all the time, so that's one less thing to think about. In a helicopter, we have a cyclic which controls forward or backwards, in some cases left and right if we're at a hover. We have this particular control here is the collective, and the collective controls the pitch in the blades all at the same time, collectively. And that's what makes the helicopter go up or down vertically, and it also adds more power from the engines, so that makes the helicopter speed up or slow down. And then to make it a little more challenging, we have pedals which control the tail rotor, and the tail rotor controls the direction of the nose of the helicopter, especially when you're at low airspeeds or a hover. Comparing my father's Vietnam experiences to my experiences in Iraq, I guess, is only a natural comparison to make. We spent the majority of our flying time transporting passengers from a small operating base to maybe another operating base or maybe a larger airfield where they could catch another flight somewhere. And the advantage of that was that they didn't have to go by ground convoy, which is obviously one of the more dangerous ways to travel in Iraq. I have a feeling in my father's experiences they were difficult for other reasons, obviously. A lot more enemy-related reasons than what we were experiencing. And fortunately for us, you know, we had the advantage of night vision goggles and being able to fly around with no lights on the helicopter, essentially. And that basically kept us hidden. Some of the hairier moments in Iraq were brought on by the environmental conditions, one of which was just the fact that the desert over there had very little contrast. The weather went from pretty good to very dusty in just a matter of seconds, and you know, the dust storms over there were pretty common. So just making a simple 180-degree turn when you've lost all visual reference really becomes a challenge.
Today's aviation community reflects many valuable lessons learned in flight throughout the years. In 1903, original craftsmanship, engineering, and imagination sent the wooden Wright Flyer into the sky for 12 magical seconds. A century later, countless contributions to aviation have enabled pilots around the globe to build their own airplanes with their own hands, and perhaps in a small way, share in that original dream.
The Experimental Aircraft Association, there's the national chapter and then there's the local chapter. It's a wonderful organization. So much of aviation has benefited from that organization. The community of pilots in the local area is great, and you know, just sharing ideas and projects and helping each other on, you know, a lot of the pilots will get together to work on a build of an airplane. I like building. I love doing things with my hands, whether it's building additions on a house or fixing the car engines or whatever. But I'd never done anything like this. People are pretty surprised when you tell them you're building a plane. I just talk in the neighborhood that Rick's building a plane in his garage, and when the plane was finished, when the fuselage was finished and it was leaving to go to get painted, it was a Wednesday night. It was dark, and my wife said, "The plane's leaving the garage," and she called about 7 of her friends, and the families, the kids, the parents came over, and Karen got out some champagne, and the fella who came over to pick up the plane expected just to come over, bring up the trailer, push the plane out, and he sees this crowd of people standing outside. It was pretty entertaining. One of my greatest moments of flying was after this plane was fully tested and it was ready to go on its first trip. My wife came with me, and we decided there was only one place you could take a home-built plane on its first trip, and that was to first flight at Kitty Hawk, where the Wright brothers flew. So we took this plane. It was a beautiful day. Flew down the coast, gorgeous view, and just to land at Kitty Hawk with a plane that I built, that was very cool. Yeah, I built a plane, but why could I do it? Because of what the Wright brothers had done, what people who preceded them had done, what a lot of designers since then have created. A lot of work by a lot of people, a lot of evolution allowed me to to do this, and I'm pretty lucky that I could.
In 2008, Richmond International Airport, located in Henrico County, served as a gateway for more than 3.5 million passengers. The airport averages 200 daily arrivals and departures, and every plane is a beneficiary of the work done at NASA Langley Research Center. From the development of winglets to save fuel, to enhancing a pilot's capabilities with the glass cockpit, discoveries made at Langley have revolutionized the way we fly today.
Glass cockpit is basically replacing the many dials and gauges with a computer screen so that you can display information that normally the pilot would have to read some kind of gauge and interpret that information. But the computer now can interpret it and provide the information directly for the pilot to see.
I fly the Airbus A320. It's a French aircraft made over in France. It is the most technologically advanced aircraft today. It's all glass cockpit. There's no control wheel anymore in this aircraft. It is a side stick. It's a joystick. So to get in the aircraft, it's like a big video game. Only this video game is very real and very fun, and we win all the time.
I think they still know they're flying an airplane, but it's more fun now that when you have all these gadgets that really help make it safer and easier.
This is the Boeing 717. It drives like a truck, but at the same time, you know, it's a lot of fun. It does exactly what it was designed to do, and it's been a very safe aircraft. What most people don't understand about, you know, this automation, they see these big windshields. Well, on takeoff, once we climb, we're at 20 degrees nose pitch up. We can't see out anymore. You'll see right here, aircraft show up right here. Red being, you know, within 5 seconds. So the pilot has to do something.
System test, okay.
The pilot would have to do something within 5 seconds to avoid that aircraft. And the aircraft will actually tell you to fly up or down away from the aircraft.
Wind shear ahead. Wind shear ahead. Wind shear ahead.
The aircraft will come up and tell you about any weather, anything that's going on. And we have to avoid it. And, you know, by, you know, doing an avoidance of it, you know, it's just a matter of turning your head in to get away from that weather and to avoid it.
With the modern technology and the aircraft and our maintenance personnel, our tech operations, the aircraft are very safe. The airport's very safe. You have very professional people flying the aircraft, from the pilots to the flight attendants to the ground-based crew to the tech operations. Everybody, it's a team approach.
When I get up and go to work, I cannot wait to get there. I absolutely love going to work. You know, that lasts for about 4 days though. So at the end of the 4 days, I'm ready to come home. Sometimes we have up to a 16-hour day. When you get done with the trip, and one of the first things you see when you look out the window when you get home is the Richmond airport. And it'll bring a smile to your face when you see Richmond and get back to your vehicle and get home and get some rest for the next trip.
It's just amazing to me that you can pick up an aircraft that weighs 170,000 pounds off the ground, fly it for 6 hours across the country, and land it on the other side of the country. What used to take 2 or 3 days now takes 6 hours. It's just amazing how far we've come in such a short amount of time.
In one way or another, every plane in the sky today is the beneficiary of research done at Langley, and today's most advanced fighter jets are no exception. Launching the United States Air Force and the Virginia Air Guard into the future, the F-22 Raptor is simply the latest example in a long line of airplanes studied and refined right here in Virginia.
The F-22 is the beneficiary of an awful lot of NASA technology that was developed here at Langley. The F-22 has a very large percentage of its weight is in composite materials, which gives it high strength and low weight. The engine development gives it enormous amount of thrust. If I had a chance to fly an F-22, it suddenly might be my favorite.
The F-22, we refer to it as a 5th generation fighter because it is that next generation of transformational capability. First airplane to combine low observable or stealth technology, integrated avionics, super cruise, meaning faster than Mach 1 in military power, not using the afterburners.
There's a section in the Dash 1, that's kind of the Bible of the operations limits of the airplane. And in other aircraft that I've flown, there's a long list of things that you cannot do in the airplane or bad things will happen. There's a very short list in this airplane. And at one point I think it stated that you can maneuver with reckless abandonment. That has subsequently been taken out. Someone found something that you couldn't do.
The airplane maneuvers in ways that no other airplane ever has. The flight control system, accompanied by vectored thrust, meaning they can move the nozzles around to push the thrust of the airplane in different directions, gives it a capability to fly basically when other airplanes aren't flying anymore. So when other airplanes would just be stalled and falling out of the sky, the Raptor is still maneuverable. You know, you can put your nose where you need to put it, you can recover the airplane, and you can do things both as you see in the demo for a crowd's pleasure or as necessary in combat that other airplanes simply can't do.
It's all about the threat, so whatever type of aircraft that you happen to be fighting that day. So I like to put my aircraft in an area of operation where I have exclusive use, that the adversary that I'm fighting with can't do the things I can do at that altitude or airspeed. You know, we'll point the aircraft straight up, full afterburner, we'll try to outclimb to achieve a tactical advantage. I get enough room to maneuver and nose the aircraft, to point at the adversary and then employ weapons. You know, the first time you park it in afterburner and you start zooming to the moon there, and then you decide, okay, now it's time for me to turn and point, and you can reef on the stick as hard as you want, kick the rudder pedal as hard as you want, point the nose anywhere and employ weapons. It is an amazing feeling. Now, maybe I don't need 15 or 20 bombs because I'm going to go in and take out a precise target, and I'm going to do it the first time. And oh, by the way, no one's going to see me when I go do it. I'm going to come back home alive.
As a pilot, when I put a throttle command in, it responds immediately. When I put a stick command in, it responds immediately. The airplane has great feedback to the pilot, which is kind of amazing in a pretty big, heavy airplane, and handles amazingly. You ask about how, is it so automated that you feel like you're not there? No, what the airplane does is it automates all the stuff that you used to have to integrate yourself and gives you this presentation of everything going on around you. You still have to do the pilot stuff. You still have to interpret the information and make the decisions, which is really what flying the airplane is about, not just the physical piece, but the mental piece of it, and it enhances your ability to do that.
Flying to me, I'm sure you've heard the word before, but it's a passion. It's something I've wanted to do since I was a kid, and I can't really think of anything else I'd like to do. And reasons for that are, you know, there's some selfish reasons because it's an amazing feeling to go up and employ an aircraft like this, or any aircraft for that matter. The other aspect of it is, you know, what better way to go to work than to serve your community, the state of Virginia, and the nation as well.
A pilot's passion for flying is the driving force behind the evolution of aviation. Time has modified the shape of an airplane, its engine, and many of its capabilities. Unchanged through the years is the passion for a freedom that only a pilot can possess, and only the sky can provide.